Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real delight to welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Afrooz Kaviani Johnson. I lead UNICEF's work on child protection in relation to the digital environment. Let me kick off with a few housekeeping points. We really invite each and every one of you to engage with us and our panelists via the Q&A function that is activated, and we will do our very best to address as many questions as possible within the time we have today. We will also be recording today's webinar and will make it available on our website for those people who could not join us live. So it's a full agenda over the next 58 minutes. So we're just launching right into it, and we'd love to get to know who is in the virtual room a little bit better. So we're just kicking off with a small poll. Your responses are anonymous. So the first question that you should see up on your screen is, how familiar are you with AI chatbots and AI companions as a child rights issue? And then we're also eager to hear what brought you to the webinar today. Are you wanting to learn more about the risks and harms? Are you interested in the regulatory responses? What is it that really motivated you to sign up for today's webinar? And then finally, we're eager to hear what describes best your role in relation to this topic. So, what sector are you representing or involved in, just so we get a better sense of who is in the virtual room. Excellent. So I think that completes our webinar. Josie, does everyone get a sense of the responses to the webinar poll?
You should be able to see now the responses. If not, I will quickly share the headlines from what we heard from 95 of you who responded. Shall I do that if you can't see it?
Yeah, please do. I think that'll be interesting.
So first question, how familiar are you? We do have a nice spread. 42%, the most popular response was somewhat familiar. And we do have some experts, 34%, 32 people were very familiar. And we also have a few of you who are new to the topic. You're all welcome. We hope you will all get something useful from today's presentations and discussion. What brought you to this webinar? Again, we have a bit of a spread. The most popular response was, I want to better understand the risks and harms for children. So some of you are here to learn and listen, which is amazing. Several of you are interested particularly in the regulatory approaches, which is a key focus of the policy brief, and we will share more about it. 20% of you said that. 11 of you are looking for practical guidance for your own organization. We will have specific recommendations for business and policymakers, so we hope you'll find that useful. And then another popular response, 21, I'm following the broader AI governance debate, and certainly we have tried to draw those links with this issue. And finally, what best describes your role? We have 30% are child protection or child rights advocacy specialists. We've got 19% policy and regulation. We also have some product or trust and safety, focal points, researchers, and a really good spread. So welcome to all of you, and over to you, Afrooz.
Thanks so much, Josie. And indeed, we're really delighted to have such a diverse group of participants with us today. Without further ado, I would love to hand over to Sheema Sen Gupta, who is going to provide some formal opening remarks to start us off today. Sheema is UNICEF's Global Director of Child Protection and Migration. She has a long UNICEF career and pre-UNICEF as well, which spans both development and complex humanitarian contexts. She's very well experienced in advocating for child rights in complex emergencies and complex situations. So in her various roles, she's led programs focused on making sustainable changes in systems, policy, and service delivery for children and for women. Sheema, thank you for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Afrooz. Oh my God, that introduction. But first of all, let me say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you're taking this from. And really, really very pleased to see so many of you joining us. So it is an exciting discussion, and I'm sure we'll have more join because I know the numbers registered are huge as well. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I want to start by quoting a teenager from India who recently took part in a UNICEF consultation on digital futures and said, "We will have more online friends than physical ones, and AI will become our friends." So clearly, my friends here, children have already started to appreciate the implications of these technologies. So with that, I do want to say that it is such a pleasure to be here just to share a few thoughts with you as we launch UNICEF's new brief on this really critical issue. We're meeting now at a time when things are moving so fast, incredibly fast. And we've seen that in just a couple of years, AI chatbots have gone from being a novelty to something that children and young people use every day. And they use them not just for homework or creativity, but more and more we see that they actually turn to AI chatbots for advice, for reassurance, for a sense of connection, for friendship, as we've heard. And this particular shift is what matters. Because when technology starts to take on a relational role in children's lives, the stakes are very different. There is potential here, and we definitely need more research to understand the opportunities as well as the risks. It is possible that these tools could support learning, creativity, and access to information. But we have seen that they do create new risks, especially when they blur the line between a tool and something that feels like a companion or a friend. And we're seeing concerns around emotional dependency, exposure to harmful or inaccurate content, privacy, and the possibility of children relying on systems that are not equipped to respond appropriately in moments of vulnerability. So if they're turning to them for advice, they're not equipped. And at the same time, what we are seeing is that the policy and the regulatory responses are also playing catch up. Across countries, we see clear momentum. However, much of this is really recent, it's uneven, and often, sadly, it's triggered by tragic incidents rather than anticipation. That's why the core message of this brief, and really of today's conversation, is the need to shift from reactive to preventive approaches. we shouldn't wait for harm to occur before acting. And we've never, I mean, for other aspects, right, in the real world, you know, we don't do that. Why would we do that in the virtual world? We need to build safeguards from the start. We need to think about these risks early. We say early, but, you know, we are a bit late. We need to design with children in mind. We need to be transparent about what these systems are. And we need to put in place meaningful accountability. And for UNICEF, this is really part of a broader commitment to ensure that AI works for children and that children are safe in digital environments. That means supporting governments, engaging with industry, and pushing for stronger evidence and research while keeping children's rights, safety, and well-being at the center of all of that. And that brings me to today's panel and to all of you. And I understand that nearly 450 people registered. So to all of them, everyone, those of you who are already here, those of you who registered, we have a really important mix of perspectives, both on this panel and in the audience, from government, academics, companies, investors, product designers, and critically, young people. That range of voice matters because no single group can navigate these challenges alone. It will take all of us to work together to ensure that AI develops in a way that is safe, responsible, and truly supportive of children. So thank you again for being part of this conversation. And I look forward to this discussion and more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheema, for those opening remarks. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. Now we're going to turn to the next part of our agenda, which is actually to share the policy brief. It's now live on our website, so we'll also share the link in the chat. And I'd like to invite Josie and Sabine to make this presentation. Just by way of a quick intro, Josie is a child rights and business specialist who's leading UNICEF's work on responsible business conduct in relation to digital. And Dr. Sabine Witting is co-founder of Tech Legality, together with Emma Day. And Tech Legality, for those of you who don't know, is a consulting firm specializing in human rights and tech. So to everyone who's on the call, please do remember to capture your questions in the Q&A function at any time. But without further ado, over to you, Josie.
Thanks so much, Afrooz. It's really our pleasure to share with you this new resource, which you can access via the QR code and also the link that will shortly be available in chat. Some background about this policy brief. For us as UNICEF, we're increasingly being asked by governments, regulators, partners to advise on how AI chatbots and companion-like systems should be governed. So this document, its purpose is really to inform this rapidly evolving policy-making area, and it examines how AI chatbots and companions relate to children's rights, compares regulatory approaches across 6 jurisdictions as of the 15th of May. This is a very fast-moving space, and critically identifies actions and recommendations for policymakers and businesses. You'll find both resources on this page. We've pulled out a brief 2-pager capturing, crystallizing those key recommendations for business as well, which we hope you'll find useful. Briefly, let's start by outlining what we mean by AI chatbots and companions, noting that these definitions have certainly not been fully aligned and been made concrete. We also encountered some disagreement as to whether the term companion should be used at all in relation to generative AI models and systems, because indeed that creates a risk of anthropomorphization. Apologies, I will struggle with that word throughout the presentation in itself. So really, this is an evolving and fast-moving space. Chatbots very briefly, are general purpose large language models that mimic human-like conversations, and they are a form of generative AI. They can be either standalone apps or integrated into platforms that are commonly used by children, and they're not designed for counseling or care or these sorts of relationships, but they are capable of offering relational interactions and personal advice and emotional support. AI companions really intensify some of the concerns that are created by chatbots. They're often marketed with the promise of empathy or friendship or romantic or therapeutic partnership. Some are promoted as companions, quote unquote, with a soul, or who make users feel seen and loved. We've seen AI companions often feature hyper-feminized, female-presenting characteristics for romantic interaction and can reinforce harmful gender stereotypes as well. We see an investigation by the Australia eSafety Commissioner that found popular AI companion apps to have weak protections for children, like failure to refer suicide or self-harm conversations to support services. So how much do we know about the extent of this issue? I'll quote only two quick numbers here, that over 40% of teenagers in Italy ask AI for help when sad, anxious, or making important life decisions, and 10% of internet-using children in Brazil report using generative AI to discuss personal problems. And of course, although these risks apply to all children, adolescents who are more socially or emotionally vulnerable may be especially likely to turn to AI companions, and therefore we need to think about this vulnerability lens when designing responses as well. The paper goes into a bit more detail, really emphasizing that additional research is needed to understand benefits as well as risks, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things signposted also by Sheema in her opening remarks, that we do see there are potential opportunities for creativity, learning, or to help children process personal experiences, for example, only when these tools are designed in ways that enable children's development. Critically, though, the paper also outlines under different categories of child rights impacts some risks, particularly associated with AI tools and companions that are designed to engage children in relational or parasocial interactions in ways that really pose serious risks to their rights in relation to the digital environment. In the interest of time, I won't go through all of these, but let me take the first example, the best interests of the child. We see children's tendency to anthropomorphize, combined with their evolving cognitive and socio-emotional capacities, increases the risk of dependency, emotional attachment, and exploitation in interactions with chatbots. And also in the research we reviewed, we see commercial incentives leaning against restricting free-form dialogue, filtering certain keywords and other measures, creating a safety versus engagement dilemma that needs to be grappled with. At this point, I'll hand over to Sabine to share more about the regulatory analysis.
Thank you so much, Josie. Yeah, the best way to really understand what is going on and how countries are tackling this emerging threat is through comparative legal analysis. So this is what we've done. We've focused on 6 jurisdictions here. When we selected the jurisdictions, we tried to cover different regions. So we have covered 5 regions here. We looked at different regulatory approaches, regulatory maturity, different legal systems, and so on. And we have landed for this analysis on Australia, Brazil, California, China, the EU, and the UK. So this is just a brief overview of how the countries have approached the issue of AI chatbots and AI companions, and also how far the law is implemented. So Australia has approached it through its Online Safety Act, through 2 additional codes that are complementing the Online Safety Act as it stands. And this is, as you all know, a law that's being implemented already. Brazil has a 2-tiered approach. So first we have the Online Safety Regulation, which is the Digital ECHA, which has just entered into force into March, which is accompanied by a decree which provides quite detailed guidance on AI chatbots. And also there is a draft AI regulation that will deal with general purpose AI, which also includes potentially AI chatbots and AI companions more broadly. This is a law that will hopefully be voted for in 2026. California, on the other hand, is approaching the topic from quite a different angle through its consumer protection law, the Business and Professions Code. And this is an amendment that has already entered into force in 2025, but there are further 2 bills pending that are further addressing this topic within the consumer protection law. China is approaching this from a very specific AI regulation standpoint. As you might remember from our previous brief on AI governance, China is a country that takes a sectoral and iterative approach to AI regulation. They have adopted a specific interim measure already on anthropomorphic AI systems, which also covers AI chatbots, but also they have further administration measures pending at the moment, which are open for consultation. The EU is approaching it again from 2 angles. We've got the AI Act and we have the Digital Services Act, which is an online platform regulation. Depending on whether the AI chatbot or companion is considered an online platform or is part of an online platform, it will be covered by the DSA, but it will also be covered by the AI Act as a general purpose AI. As you know, these are laws that are implemented, but also the AI Act is undergoing currently some modification through the Digital Omnibus. And lastly, we have the UK. Also here, the changes are situated within the online safety regulation, but these amendments are being put forth through the draft crime and policing bill. So quite a widespread of regulatory approaches here. Next slide, please, Josie. So what have we found? A lot of these regulatory approaches are very, very recent. So they have been developed between 2024 and 2026. And what we also found very interesting is that in most cases, it is not the government that proactively considered AI chatbots or AI companion an emerging threat and took action. It was the other way around. Something bad happened first, and then the governments took actions. For example, in Brazil, the Brazilian government asked Meta to take down AI chatbots that are pretending to be children and can engage in sexual conversation. Or in the UK, of course, we had a big outcry after the Grok incident early 2026, where Grok was used to develop non-consensual sexual images. And the UK government felt like they did not have enough tools under the Online Safety Act to react to that. So all of these legislation have been prompted by some form of risk or harm to children in relation to these AI tools. With the partial exception of China, none of the jurisdictions have adopted a bespoke AI chatbot instrument. As you have seen in the previous table, there are kind of 2 main regulatory approaches that emerge. First is an amendment or an integration of AI chatbots and AI companions under existing child-specific legislation, so the Online Safety Act, for example, in Australia and in the UK, or the Digital ECA in Brazil. Or we have an incorporation into broader, more general AI platform regulation or consumer protection laws, which is the case in California and the EU. There's no preference in terms of countries should go about it. But I think it just demonstrates that there is a push towards integrating these instruments where they can fit best and where these amendments can be affected the fastest. Next slide, please, Josie. So Josie already alerted to that. How are jurisdictions defining AI chatbots? And only 4 of the jurisdictions we looked at, namely Australia, California, China, and the UK, define these terms at all. And where we have a definition, there's usually a convergence around 3 core elements. Obviously, there is a reference to machine learning or AI. These chatbots are supposed to mimic some form of human conversation. In the case of AI companions, there's also relational focus. But also we see a difference in how these definitions characterize AI chatbots and AI companions. There is a capability-centered definition, which we see, for example, in Australia. So the focus is on what the AI chatbot can generate. So here the focus is on the capability to produce content within restricted categories, for example, online pornography or self-harm material. And other jurisdictions, for example, the UK, are more looking at behavior-based definitions. So what is the AI chatbot capable of doing? What kind of interaction can it present to the user? And for example, the UK makes reference here to mimicry of human conversation and relationships. So, big table. I will not go through all of this. I want you to alert you to this, that this is something you should really be looking up in our paper. So there are common regulatory elements across all of these jurisdictions: risk assessments, age assurance and access controls, transparency about the non-human nature of the system, restrictions on content harmful to children, and user reporting mechanisms. But of course, as it is in law, the devil lies in the details. So even though we have like a broad convergence on these regulatory measures, they are quite different in the regulatory detail, something for you to have a look at in the paper. And I will just alert to a few points in the next slide. So for example, around risk assessment and management. So as an example, in Australia, we have a tiered model, which is categorizing AI services by risk. And then depending on the risk category, the codes are prescribing very detailed mitigation measures that companies need to take to ensure compliance with the Online Safety Act and the codes. California is taking quite a different approach. They are more focusing on design and behavioral safeguards, for example, 3-hourly break reminders. And the UK, again, is taking a very different approach because their focus really is on criminal law. So they may get a criminal offense for failure to assess and mitigate risks, where chatbot displays certain capabilities, for example, where they're misleading children or they use exploitative design. And also under the Online Safety Act or the proposed amendment, senior company representatives can indeed be held personally liable. We also see that sexual live content and erotic interaction are among the most strictly regulated aspects. So for example, in Brazil and China, there are access level restrictions. So children through age verification or age assurance processes are not allowed to even enter these platforms, whereas California is more looking at an output level restriction. And also we have quite a divergence in forms of the enforcement mechanisms. Australia, Brazil, China, and the EU are focusing on administrative or regulatory enforcement through their existing online safety regulations or AI regulations. California, as a consumer protection law, focuses primarily on private litigation. And the UK has a unique combination between criminal liability, regulatory enforcement, and in cases of emergencies, also injunctive relief. Over to you, Josie.
Thanks, Sabine. To wrap up, I wanted to highlight that the brief does end in some concrete takeaways for policymakers. I invite you to review those recommendations at the end of the document, emphasizing things like establishing a minimum baseline, pre-deployment testing, ensuring enforcement capacity, etc. Yes, so we've tried to capture all of the key messages from that analysis of those 6 jurisdictions. And finally, also similarly, we have tried to capture recommendations for business, which is available as a 2-pager separately. And I wanted to signpost that this also builds on UNICEF's bedrock of guidance for industry on child rights and responsible technology that does include impact assessment, due diligence approach to digital marketing, and robust disclosure. I invite you to have a look at those resources as well in this QR code and in the chat. I will stop there and hand back to you, Afrooz.
Thank you so much, Josie and Sabina. I know there's a lot in the brief and we could only give you a taster this morning, but thanks a lot. Now, I'm delighted to move to the next phase of our webinar where we're going to have a really spectacular panel. We're thrilled that all these people have taken time to join us today. We've got 5 experts from very different perspectives. Like Sheema said, this is what we need in this discussion. Perspectives of industry, government, product, investors, and a young person. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Hiba, who will be speaking. Hiba is a UNICEF Morocco child rights youth advocate. She actually could not join us live because it is exam season. So she has shared a video, which I'll ask Josie to kindly project now.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining from around the world. First, I would like to sincerely thank UNICEF and the organizers of this webinar for inviting me to contribute to this important conversation. It is an honor to join experts, policymakers, researchers, industry representatives, and civil society actors who are working to ensure that technology serves the best interests of children. My name is HibatAllah Alami. I am a UNICEF Morocco youth advocate and a student in computer science in the PFL, Switzerland, and a young person who has seen how rapidly artificial intelligence is becoming part of children's everyday lives. Today, I would like to share why the issue of AI chatbots and AI companions matters so much for children and teenagers. For my generation, AI is not a distant technology. It is already helping us to study, create, communicate, and solve problems. Many young people use AI to learn new skills, to improve their writing, explore scientific concepts, and access information that was previously difficult to find. For some children, including those who feel isolated or lack educational support, AI can provide valuable assistance and open new opportunities. However, the growing role of AI companions raises important concerns. Children and teenagers are still developing emotionally and socially. So when an AI system is designed to act like a friend, like a mentor, or even a trusted companion, some young people may form strong emotional attachments without fully understanding that they are interacting with a machine. This can be especially risky for children who are lonely, anxious, or going through difficult situations. Another concern is that AI systems can sometimes provide inaccurate information or inappropriate responses. Because these systems communicate in a confident and human-like way, young users may trust them more than they should. We must also pay attention to privacy also. So children often share personal information, personal thoughts, feelings, and experiences online, and they deserve a strong protection for their data and their dignity. And at the same time, I do not believe that the answer is to fear innovation. AI has enormous potential to support education, creativity, accessibility, and inclusion. So the challenge is ensuring that innovation advances children's rights rather than putting them at risk. My message to policymakers, technology companies, educators, and parents also is very simple. Children's safety must be built into AI systems from the beginning and not added afterward. Young people need appropriate safeguards, transparent information about how the systems work, and strong privacy protections, and clear support when they encounter harmful content or situations. Most importantly, children and young people must be included in these conversations. Decisions about technologies that shape our future should not be made without hearing the voices of those who will live with their consequences the longest. AI is becoming a companion in many young people's life. It is our collective responsibility to ensure that it becomes a tool for empowerment, learning, and well-being, and not a source of harm. Thank you very much for your attention.
With many thanks to Hiba for those remarks. I'm really now delighted to introduce Zainab. She is VP Sustainability and Lead on Responsible AI at the Telenor Group. And we're also most grateful to the Telenor Group for making this policy brief possible through their support. Zainab recently ventured into the AI space with hands-on experience in a business unit environment, and her work today focuses on building group-wide responsible AI culture and governance to accelerate innovation and value creation. So she's facilitating sustainability automation and continues to explore AI for the good of people, planet, and the society. So Zainab, we'd love to hear your reflections on the brief today and how, in your view, businesses like Telenor are orientating towards these new responsible AI challenges and opportunities.
Thank you so much, Afrooz, and I hope you can all hear me well and see me well. Thank you for inviting me for this webinar. This issue is quite close to my heart personally, and also very important to how we work responsibly at Telenor. We are a telecommunications and technology company serving over 160 million customers across the Nordics and Asia. You have already heard from different colleagues from UNICEF and other partner organizations explaining the policy brief, so I'm not really going to go into the depths of that. But as a UNICEF partner, we in Telenor, as you mentioned, Afrooz, we've both technically and financially contributed and supported the development of this policy brief, which we are very proud of. And as I said, I won't repeat what's in the brief, but I will try to focus a little bit on what this brief and what it surfaces means for companies like ours at Telenor. So at Telenor, we're just to clarify, we're not building foundation models. We're not the Anthropics or the frontier companies, as they're called, and we're not the hyperscaler either. We deploy AI in our operations and products and services for our customers. We do not sell directly to children, but we know that children do use our services. And that means they are not our customers, but as users, there is a responsibility here that is created for us as an organization. And we have recognized this responsibility for a long time and have strong programs across all our markets to address the related risks. Since 2022, we have trained almost 13.5 million children, young people, and other vulnerable groups in digital skills, where online safety has been a core theme in that work. And AI, together with the issue of digital addiction amongst children and adults, but now we're talking about children, has made the topic much more urgent and much more complex. At Telenor, we focus on what is within our sphere of control to promote children's well-being and how we can expand that sphere of control over time. Because when it comes to AI, responsibility cannot be static. It evolves with how the technology evolves, how it is deployed, and how it is used. And we do this by grounding our work in our responsible AI principles that we've set for our company. And these principles lay the foundations of a governance mechanism for deploying and using AI systems that are safe and secure, transparent and explainable, that are fair and non-exploitative, that are accountable with clear ownership, are respectful of privacy and data protection. I'm so happy to hear Hiba talk about that. And with human oversight, especially in sensitive contexts. For children, this essentially translates into one priority above all. Guardrails in our systems must be intentional and not incidental. So, for example, if we deploy a telecom sales chatbot, which interfaces with our customers, the guardrails in the development of that chatbot should be such that the chatbot stays firmly within the intended scope of what it is supposed to do and not attempt to answer other topics if there is a curious child playing around with it. On the other hand, we must also acknowledge that technology is moving much faster than governance, than regulation, and sometimes even our own understanding of how things are happening. I just heard Sabine also talk about the EU AI Act and the Omnibus that is working towards changes in it. One aspect that has come about from the draft guidelines that the EU has just floated includes the topic of banning, or at least floating the topic of banning nudification apps and child sexual abuse content generators, which is fantastic, right? But again, we are just catching up. So while we continue innovation, we must actively protect children in parallel. This requires continuous adjustment, not just one-time compliance. So this is a spectrum that we as companies need to focus on in terms of our governance. But in doing so, we shouldn't overly focus on technical fixes alone when it comes to child protection. Guardrails, age assurance, risk assessments, for all of you, I encourage that these are excellent points that the policy brief services. These are all critical. But we should not forget the social structures that we have supported, that have supported children over time. And these include parents, teachers, schools, communities, helplines. And as AI becomes more embedded in children's lives, we need to be just as creative in strengthening these systems. AI should not replace these safety nets. It should connect children back to them when it matters most. And we also need to challenge the instinct of restrictions. Only a child asking an AI system about self-harm should not just be blocked from the system. They should be guided. They should be guided immediately to professional support, like a child helpline, for example. So the goal should be, in my view, to not only prevent harm, but to incentivize safe pathways, to design for escalation, and to keep children connected to real-world support. Because children are growing up in an AI-integrated society. They cannot be excluded from it. They need to be protected within it. And then I think we also have to have a balanced conversation about risks and opportunities, also something that Hiba said. Because AI does enable learning at scale, creativity, access to information, and support for different cognitive and social needs. So for many children, these are real positive outcomes. And if we only focus on the negatives, we risk designing systems that limit potential instead of unlocking it safely. And then finally, one group that we need to talk more are the likes of Hiba. Children themselves, they are not just users, they are primary stakeholders in this context. And at Telenor, we address this in our risk assessments. We address them through our human rights due diligence work as clear stakeholders, and also in our double materiality assessment processes, which then feed into our strategy work. It is important to understand how children experience these systems, but also what would make them feel safe, both in using those systems or in not using them at all. So what is it that they need from us in the real world instead? To conclude, the risks of children's relational over-reliance on AI companions, chatbots, and assistants are already materializing. It is our responsibility as businesses to act within our sphere of control and expand it with partnerships like Telenor has with UNICEF, and to ensure that innovation and child protection move forward together. Because getting this right is not only about managing enterprise risk at the business level, it is about shaping the kind of AI-enabled digital society all our children will grow up in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zainab. So much there, and we're so grateful for your insights and your deep experience in this space and deep commitment. So thanks so much, Zainab. In the interest of time, I do need to move quickly to our next speaker, and I'm delighted that we have joining us Ricardo, Lins Horta, who is the Director of Online Security and Risk Prevention at the National Secretariat for Digital Rights of the Brazilian Ministry of Justice and Public Security. Also the coordinator of the regulation and implementation process of the Brazilian Digital ECA, which many of you may be familiar with, and of course is also signposted in our brief. Brazil is really pioneering in the area of digital and child rights regulation. So we're delighted, Ricardo, to have you here. And we wondered if you could share with us a little bit about what defines Brazil's approach to regulating and enforcing oversight of AI chatbots, and where do you see the biggest challenges and opportunities? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Afrooz. So nice to be here. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to have this conversation. Brazil has chosen, and I think the policy brief from UNICEF shows this very well. I think it was very faithful to what's happening down here. We have just approved this sweeping legislation on child protection. So it deals with lots of different digital services. So not only social media, which haven't been banned in Brazil, they just have to be linked to a parent's account until 16 years old, but also artificial intelligence. There was one important thing here is that while the Chamber of Representatives is still discussing the possibility of approving a AI bill, which would concern AI as a whole, all kinds of applications and digital services, AI-based, we have put into the digital ECA and also in its specific norms, which is the decree, which is mentioned in the policy brief, some specificities that concern AI chatbots and AI companions. So if you are able to somehow have interactions by which you can generate images or videos or even written content that has sexual or erotica contents, you must have age verification. This is still going to be implemented in the second semester in Brazil, but it has also affected our age rating system. This is important to say. Brazil has changed last October its age rating system. Usually, age rating systems, they are not mandatory, of course. I think you're all aware of that. But since we have the 4Cs risk classification scheme, we have realized that we should stop looking at online services only in terms of content. So every kind of interactive functionality is going to impact the age rating system of apps as well. So many of those AI companions have been rated 18 years old in Brazil, which means that if you want to download them in the app stores, Google and Apple's app stores, now you need parental consent as well. So this is the idea. So it's not only for Grok, but for every kind of AI companion by which you can have this kind of conversation. Also in the decree, we have put, and this is in the brief, some protections concerning AI functionalities as a whole. So this includes AI chatbots as a whole. So they should not have manipulative functionalities. They should be transparent concerning the idea that you're not talking to a human, it is a machine. And they should have risk evaluations. We're still going to have regulations on that by the National Data Protection Agency in Brazil. And this is one important thing, and this is the last thing I'm going to bring because your report was just perfect. I think it was very, as I said, very faithful to what's going on down here, which is the same institution that does data protection is the one that is going to do child protection. This is very important because in many cases, such as age verification, you do have a trade-off between freedom of expression, privacy, and the collection of data to protect children. So this is something that we are really hopeful that could work very well. And last but not least, it has been difficult to discuss online and digital regulations in the Global South, always. We have this huge resistance, but so far what we have seen with Digital ECA is lots of compliance. So especially the bigger companies, whenever they launch protections for children, such as in the UK or in California or Europe, they also launch the same functionalities in Brazil. So I would like to invite my peers from the global majority countries here to tell them, approve your own legislations. It's going to work. That's what we have to do, everybody together. Thank you so much, Afrooz. Thank you, everybody, for having the opportunity to be with you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Ricardo. A very fantastic insight. And indeed, a lot of jurisdictions are watching closely what is happening in Brazil, and very reassuring to hear those final words from you as well. I'd now like to move to our next speaker, Ms. Lauren Compere, who is Managing Director and Head of Stewardship and Engagement at Boston Common Asset Management, which is a majority employee-owned, women-led firm specializing in global sustainable and responsible investing. So Lauren has more than 30 years in the field and is leading one of the most active global engagement programs in sustainable investments, spanning human rights, responsible AI, biodiversity, and health equity. Lauren, you've had a chance to review our guidance, and we're eager to hear from you where you see the alignment with what investors are already asking companies on responsible AI practices, and what more investors could do specifically to focus on online child safety related to AI chatbots and companions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I think what's really important to highlight is the role of investors in ensuring accountability. I think, as many of the other speakers have already highlighted, there are regulation is really behind. There is not robust global regulation, and so as investors, we're sort of in this interesting space between regulators and company practices and expectations. The initiative that I've been co-leading for a number of years now, 4 years, really looks at how companies are sort of the governance and the risk management framework and the implementation and due diligence. and also disclosure. And many of these asks are very much aligned. And I think one of the most important areas we as investors focus on are in the highest risk quadrant, and also sensitive use cases. And child online safety is really, key. I think a key focus for investors. And in terms of engagement with companies, we as investors, engage companies on these topics. We really look at their governance structure, their processes. And what I think is really important is to highlight the real alignment of your ask specifically on online child safety and especially AI chatbots and companions with asks we already have in place. But I wanted to go a little bit kind of deeper in terms of like what we think is needed in this particular space. We also align with the idea of pre-due diligence of children rights impact assessment for the highest risks, post-deployment. I think we heard from the first speaker, that your youth advocate, that we need children to be part of the discussion and the solutions. So this idea of stakeholder engagement with children experts and also youth themselves. In sort of understanding what the risks are and what the solutions could be. I think the other thing that I think is really important and aligns very nicely with what you've outlined at UNICEF is this idea of mitigation and really what mitigation looks like. And again, these are things that we as investors are already engaging companies on. Safety by design, age assurance, but age assurance that really minimizes, or emphasizes children's privacy and also not being intrusive. I think what's really important is this idea of the crisis intervention is critical. We've asked for this in other high-risk use cases like military AI, for example, when things are going wrong. And also, we should not discount the role of parents, but we shouldn't over-rely on parental controls. I think one of the things we've seen through our engagement over the years is that there's an overemphasis of parental controls. There's a balancing act between parental controls, parental access, and sort of embedded by design these safeguards and guardrails. This has to be ongoing. AI is changing quite rapidly. The use cases are quite, and there is, I think, a place for some restrictions. And in the case of things like, sort of mental health, for example. And I think that's important to think about as regulators are looking at this and as companies are advertising sort of new products and new use cases. Anyway, we're so aligned, and I want to see investors included in the next brief, what investors should be doing. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Lauren. We're delighted to have you as part of this, and indeed would love to have further engagement with the investor community because it is a really important lever for change, I think, in this space. And I should really reiterate my huge thanks to our panelists who have been asked to cover a lot in a very short amount of time. So I do really appreciate you keeping it brief, though I know there's so much more we could unpack together. So now I'd like to introduce Vaishnavi. Vaishnavi is the founder and principal of VIS, a product advisory firm building child safety solutions with platforms. And prior to founding this organization, this company, Vaishnavi served as the head of youth policy at Meta and was responsible for the company's approach to age-appropriate experiences across all its products. She's previously held roles at Twitter, was Twitter's first head of safety in the Asia Pacific region, and worked on child safety policy in the region for Google as well. Vaishnavi, I'm keen to really draw on your policy and product background and think about how you would translate some of the insights and recommendations in our brief to be really, more accessible and relevant for our startups in this space.
Of course. And thank you for having me here, Afrooz. This has been such an incredible panel discussion to be a part of. So, let me just start with where I sit, because I think it'll shape how, I answer. At Vice, our team are comprised of product and policy builders, and all of us come from some of the largest tech platforms, regulators, and clinical bodies in the world. And so all of us at Vice have deep experience launching these youth safety features that we're talking about today inside some of the largest platforms under real launch pressure, and all the while having to keep broader business considerations in mind. So when I initially read this brief and was thinking about the comments to share, as we talked about, the translation I was thinking about mostly was, well, how would this apply for our clients? How would this apply for a company that's thinking about how to build this? So there are three sort of framing mechanisms I'd want to offer, and I'll do my best to be as quick as I can. The first is, it's very easy to read a brief like this and immediately start processing it as a compliance cost. I would actually argue that this is a first mover credential. This is what's going to get you to market much faster, because what this brief has done really well is consolidate some of the core elements that are increasingly forming the legal floor in terms of how we design these products. That legal floor is not going away. And so we can all agree that these elements are going to exist. So as a company, you need to think of your strategy. What you do need to decide for your individual organization is what's the product mechanism you're going to be using to implement them. So for example, perhaps we agree on risk assessments or say age assurance, but is that happening at the input layer at the moment that somebody's accessing the service? Or is it happening at the output layer the moment someone gets a response from one of these chatbots? Those kind of forks can decide whether the product you're building for one market is the same as another. So getting that product architecture right now becomes a really strong credential you can carry into your next 10 markets, maybe even your next round of fundraising if you're a small, startup looking to, grow the organization. And I think you just need to ask the companies that are in the headlines right now how much it's costing to retrofit safety after the incident instead of having, built it beforehand. The second reframe I'd like to offer is, our clients range from large platforms to, I think one of our smallest clients is like 4 people large. So the instinct here is definitely going to be to put off many of these processes until you're bigger. But actually, I think a lot of the procedural language here can mostly be collapsed into just about a handful of design instincts to carry in your head. So for example, the policy brief talks about continuous human rights due diligence. And that really means understand the 3 or 4 ways that your product could impact a kid in a negative way, and have an owner for each one of those ways before you ship your product. You talk about tiering products by risk. I think that's a really great idea. Be honest about whether what you're building is a homework helper or if it's a romantic companion. And those are not the same product. They are not going to have the same guardrails. So you don't always need a policy team to make that call, right? You just need to be able to ask those questions early while the answers are still relatively cheap to act on. And I think the companies that build this muscle early on are really going to be able to ground their overall product. And then the final reframe, the final frame mechanism that I'd like to leave folks with is that I strongly believe, and I think all of us at Vice strongly believe, that age-aware design does not shrink what you can build for kids and teens. It actually lets you build more. And I think it's very natural to feel defensive. Okay, I'm going to lock down the product. I'm going to strip it back. I'm going to give you sort of I'm going to give any under 18 user the adult version of the product with all the scary parts removed. But actually, that's not what a valuable experience looks like. And the real opportunity here is that once your system knows who it's talking to and how old that person is, you can build things that you would never risk otherwise. If you know that you have shut, say, 13-year-olds out of some of the most dangerous parts of the product, you can now start building better creative tools for them with age-attuned safeguards. I think ultimately, and I'm really glad to hear both the student as well as several folks here acknowledge, this is really powerful technology, and when wielded right, has the real potential to benefit young people. And when we build with their age in mind, we can build better, more creative products. So if I'm going to compress all of this, yes, definitely, follow the great guidance from this brief, but also treat it as a product specification guide. And that's how you're going to get to build products and experiences that everybody else is going to be too slow to actually ship. I look forward to seeing many more of those products out in the market soon.
Thanks so much, Vaishnavi. I loved all your reframing there, and I cannot think of a better way to, finish up our webinar. We are on time, and we've tried our very best to answer the questions in the chat, but I just wanted to open the floor quickly in case any of our panelists had any thought or reaction, something burning that you wanted to share before we close up, and thank everyone for their participation. I'm not seeing anyone unmute themselves, but I did just want to offer that last opportunity with a enormous thank you to our expert panelists, including Hiba, who I should have mentioned, she's actually studying computer science and AI. So I'm so assured for the future of the space with young advocates like Hiba working in this area. All our expert panelists, enormous thank you for your time, for your reflections. All our participants, thank you for the questions. We've tried our best to answer live, but I think this has really shown the appetite and the need for more discussions and more engagement on this topic. Really, thank you to everyone that contributed to the project. It's now, I guess, over to each and every one of us, like Vaishnavi reframed. You can take the brief and use it in your sphere of influence, as Zainab also talked to the work that Telenor is doing as well. So I think there are clear calls to action, and certainly lots more work that needs to be done, but with every one of us playing a role. So huge thank you again, and we're looking forward to keeping up the conversation.